Jonathan, your colleagues at Politico have a new piece up, David Siders and Meredith McGraw, about these candidates in the Republican field, the potential candidates, not mentioning January 6th, which is such an interesting point. This is not going to be a question in the Republican primary. Of all the ways they could go after Donald Trump, you might think leading an attempted coup against the United States government would be one of them. But January 6th are words that are not going to be spoken much, at least in this primary campaign.
They certainly haven't been so far. We'll hear about them plenty in the general election, I am sure. But right now, these Republican candidates, as the piece smartly points out, aren't talking about it at all because there'd be real risk to do so. And at least it would seem like if you were a Republican who tried to come in even just slightly more mainstream than where Trump is, saying, hey, I can give you a lot of his policies without a lot of the crazy. This might be a place where you could create some daylight and say, look, I'm not going to lead a riot. But isn't it because they're fearful of so many Republican voters who maybe don't agree with the violence of that day, but bought the big lie, and so many of them still, to this moment, don't think that President Biden was legitimately elected?
I was saying 30. I put it more at 40% of the Republican primary electorate who supportive of January 6th, supportive of Donald Trump no matter what, and they're unwavering. And so how do you position yourself as anything but in the Trump lane if you want to have a slice of those voters? That's the conundrum for all of these candidates, unless they can break some of that away, and they won't. And if it's a crowded field, which it looks like it's going to be, we know how this story ends.
Yeah, and so, Mo, talk to us about January 6th, but also to Vaughn's point earlier, Trump's pulling his punches right now. Yeah, he bashes candidates on Truth Social. No one sees that. But in the big moments, he is not going hard after his potential rivals, at least not yet, because it's to his benefit to have more of them in, because we know his base isn't going anywhere.
That's right. I mean, he's going to do what he always does, which is wait till someone feels like they're a little bit of a threat, they're getting a little bit of traction. He'll come up with the funny nickname for them, hit them a couple of times, and then move on to the next person. And that has worked well for him in the past because, again, no one else knows how to deal with that. No one knows how to deal with him. And I think part of the challenge that some of these other candidates are going to face is that they haven't been in the spotlight before. They haven't had that glare on them yet. They haven't. Ron DeSantis has done very well in Florida, and we're all talking about him every day as the big alternative. He's never stepped out onto a national stage. He is very, very untested. And so when he gets out there onto that stage and Donald Trump starts popping him, does he crumble? Does someone else step up? January 6th is a dangerous thing within a Republican primary. That's why I think you're going to see them all try to dance around it a little bit. Someone like a Tim Scott is interesting to me because Tim Scott, who, by the way, if I was advising the Biden campaign, I'd say he's the guy you should really be paying attention to. I don't know if he can make it out of a primary, but I think he is, in a general election, the most interesting contrast with President Biden. But can someone like a Tim Scott sort of recapture the conservative argument within a Republican primary without alienating MAGA voters? Or is he going to play into the grievance politics that the others are leaning into, that DeSantis and that Nikki Haley are leaning into? That's why they can't go after January 6th, because January 6th was the ultimate expression in Republican grievance, and this is a grievance party right now.
And Vaughn, clearly Donald Trump is looking up and down that lineup of opponents or potential opponents in a primary. He just doesn't fear any of them. The only one who's gotten some of his attention is Ron DeSantis, who, again, is not in the race yet. And as Mo says, even if he gets in, we don't know how he's going to perform if he steps outside of Tallahassee, Florida, onto a national stage. You covered these campaigns. You've been on the ground. You've been in Arizona. You've spent all the time. You know the energy of the Republican Party. Should Donald Trump fear any of these opponents or potential opponents?
I think, Tim Scott, interesting potential candidate. I didn't hear his name mentioned one time at CPAC here over the course of the weekend. And I think that it's a fundamental base. It's representative of a fundamental conservative grassroots base of this Republican Party that any candidate is going to need. There is one potential candidate who is already down, and that's Larry Hogan, announcing yesterday that the former Maryland governor, that he's not going to jump into this Republican presidential race. He said that he does not want another situation where there's a car pile up of candidates that allow Mr. Trump, in his words, to walk into the nomination. But, God bless Larry Hogan. I didn't meet a single Republican voter over the last 2 years who told me I'm thinking about Larry Hogan. So I'm glad, God bless him. I hope that everything goes well for him in choosing not to run for president. But I never heard of anybody that actually wanted him to run for president here. And as it goes to January 6th, I just got to say, there was a great number of folks that did not agree with the physical means in which that day unfolded. But by and large, folks agree with the justification of the cause. And that is what we must remember every day. And it's also, when you're talking about Nikki Haley and that campaign video launch, we also haven't heard her talk about it since, the removal of the Confederate flag from the South Carolina State House. We are hearing things that have happened in our recent history that each of us covered and have lived through that we are not going to be hearing about on the Republican presidential campaign trail unless we all talk about it and ask these candidates about it. But do the voters care? Well, we've got 11 months to see.